Test 1, 2. Sega.
I never saw Tron when it came out in theaters, but when I was little we went to the video store and I rented it, and I absolutely loved it. A guy going inside a video game? That's my kind of movie. So I waited years for the sequel, and when Tron Legacy finally came out, I absolutely loved it. But there was something about it I couldn't quite put my finger on, something that didn't feel quite like Tron. I think that it might have been that it was a little too dark, or that it wasn't funny enough, so I always felt like I never got the proper sequel that I wanted. Well, one day, about 2 weeks ago, I walked into my local retro game shop, Mario's, and I asked if they had any Sega Genesis games that they didn't put out. And the clerk brought me out this game, Comix Zone. Now, I'd heard of it before, but I'd never actually played it. So I decided to pick it up. It was only $2 or $3, and I went home and I was happy to find that this may actually be the follow-up to Tron that I always wanted. Though a little bit unofficial, it really does feel like a better sequel than Tron Legacy. Let's check it out.
Comix Zone is a side-scrolling beat-em-up where you play as Sketch Turner, a smart-ass, back-talking comic book artist, much along the lines of Kevin Flynn from Tron, who also, like Kevin Flynn, gets sucked into his own work, into his own comic books. Once in the comic book world, he's forced to do battle with all the awful shit he's created over the years, from mutants to supervillains to offensive Chinese stereotypes. Sketch has a pet rat named Roadkill who can help him flip switches, find hidden items, and he can also perform a simple shock attack, hurting enemies marginally. The gameplay is quick and brutal as you face off against big, colorful enemies that all seem like they could be mini-bosses or heavies if they were in other games. The bees are the only enemies that feel throwaway, and even they provide a hell of a challenge. Speaking of challenge, the game is fairly difficult. Not to say it's impossible, but with only one continue per level and limited health items, you can break a sweat. Especially when you add the fact that punching things, like crates and doors, damages your health. Jesus Christ, it can get intense. Not that it is the hardest game ever, but it'll just get you a bit sweaty from time to time. With practice, it becomes a cakewalk. A sweaty, sweaty cakewalk. The player can use several inventory items in the game, such as dynamite, throwing knives, grenades, and even a special fist that turns you into a superhero and clears the screen of all enemies. You only have 3 spaces for items though, each mapped to the X, Y, and Z buttons, so you have to be choosy of what items you use, and even what items you choose to pick up. The game controls much like any basic beat-em-up, with punch, block, and jump functions, as well as a basic grab and throw when you hold the punch button. Nothing new or innovative, but the controls are tight and they work. Not much to complain about here. Comix Zone isn't a traditional beat-em-up where you traverse the game left to right. No, Comix Zone is a game about being inside a comic, so naturally you progress through the world as though it were a comic, moving left, right, up and down through the panels, each containing their own action. You're given plenty of opportunities to choose which panel to jump to next, and it really is a fun way of moving through rooms that pulls you into the game and just adds detail to the world. Speaking of detail, Comix Zone relishes in it. From smooth animation, large colorful sprites, and beautiful worlds, to the little things like how enemies burst apart into ripped pieces of paper when killed, the way enemies are drawn to life by a giant hand, instead of simply spawning, and the way Sketch can rip a hole in the page and make a paper airplane. Comix Zone was doing Paper Mario before Paper Mario was even a thing. At the end of each level, you face off against a big, colorful boss, much in the style of Castlevania. Learn their patterns and you won't have any problem. My favorite is Kung Fung. He's bananas. The bosses in the game seem to be a bit easy compared to the rest of the game, but that might just be because the regular enemies take a bit of a beating before dying. It takes some of the punch away from the bosses, I guess. The soundtrack and sound design in Comix Zone is well done and feels like it's got some heart behind it. But honestly, I think it could have sounded better on another system that shall not be named. That's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes. The sound isn't annoying or grating, it just feels like it could have been better served on other hardware. All in all, Comix Zone was a very pleasant surprise. Large colorful sprites, smooth animation, gameplay that just works, and a setting that takes full advantage of all those elements. Comix Zone is just a great game, plain and simple.
So maybe it's not an official follow-up to Tron, but I feel like Comix Zone comes from the same place. It has the same spirit as the original movie. It's funny, it's tongue-in-cheek, and it's really badass. Go pick it up today. I really liked it. Thanks for watching. Remember to hit subscribe.